Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Dooky Chase style fried chicken. That's right, I'm going to share my version of one of New Orleans' most famous fried chickens, which is a shockingly simple recipe, but despite its extreme simplicity, this is one of the most beautiful and delicious fried chickens you will ever eat. And to get started, the first thing we'll do is mix up this very basic spice blend, which includes nothing more than salt, some freshly ground black pepper, some granulated garlic, also known as garlic powder, and then last but not least, the king of fried chicken spices, cayenne pepper. And that's it, we'll go ahead and give that a mix. And believe it or not, most of the recipe's done. All right, the only other thing we're going to need besides the chicken is 3 large eggs, which we will add to this bowl, plus a 1/4 cup of water, which is my little addition to the recipe. I think that just makes for a little bit of a thinner, crispier coating. And then to the eggs, if we're going to fry 1 whole cut up chicken, we will add 2 tablespoons of our spice blend, at which point we can take a whisk and give this a thorough mixing. And once that's been thoughtfully combined, we can start transferring in whatever pieces of chicken we're going to fry, which for me was a whole cut up chicken. And by the way, at the end of the video, I'm going to link to a couple recipes where I show you how to cut the chicken up, including one where we do 90% of the work with scissors. And besides the super simple seasoning, what makes this different than most fried chicken recipes is that we're using eggs to soak the chicken in, and not the typical buttermilk or milk, which really does produce a different but truly amazing fried chicken. And then what we'll do once our chicken's been transferred in, and we've tossed it around to make sure it's evenly coated, we will push and poke this down the best we can, and then cover it in plastic, and we'll transfer that into the fridge, at least overnight, but I'm going to go 24 hours, which worked out really well. Oh, and if you do this in a plastic bag, you might not need to. But if we are using a bowl, we're going to want to give that a toss 2 or 3 times during the marination process, just to make sure everything gets an even soaking. And then the next day when we're ready to fry, the only other thing we need to prep is some seasoned flour, which for me is simply flour with some salt mixed in. And that's it, we can grab our chicken, and we can start transferring those pieces in, and toss it around until it's completely coated. Oh, and if you're doing this in batches, don't flour all the chicken at once, since we want to apply this right before it goes in the fryer. And after shaking off the excess, we can very carefully transfer that into our hot oil, which ideally is at 350 degrees. And since they use vegetable oil at Dooky Chase's, that's what we're going to use. And if we're going to fry the whole chicken, which I attempted to do here, they recommend we start with the breasts, since they're much bigger pieces, and give those about a 3 or 4 minute head start before we add the rest of the pieces, going from largest to smallest. And after placing that in, we'll give it about a minute and then make sure those pieces aren't sticking together, which they almost never do. Oh, and the thermometer was kind of getting in my way, so I decided to pull it out. But anyway, after giving those breasts a little bit of a head start, we'll transfer in the thighs, and then the legs, and then finally the wings, which brings us to the do not try this at home portion of the program. All right, I've never actually deep fried a whole chicken in this pot, and I would normally do this in batches, but I really wanted final shots of the entire chicken, which I ended up getting, except as you can see from the level of the oil, I risked burning my whole kitchen down in the process. So on behalf of myself and our legal department, I would like you to listen to me now so you can hear me later, as I say, do not, under any circumstances, deep fry where the oil is that close to the top of the pot. And if you're not sure why, do a video search for deep fried turkey fires. But having said that, once it was in and arranged and frying, I thought I would be okay. And yes, I did have the fire extinguisher 3 feet behind me. But to summarize, this was really stupid and should not be replicated or reproduced by you or anyone else. And then once everything's in, we'll let this fry for about 15 minutes, although that will depend on the exact size of your chicken pieces and the exact temperature of your oil, which is always going to decrease significantly once we put our chicken in. But if we keep our heat on medium-high to high, that will start to surely but slowly come back up, hopefully all the way back close to 350. But if you can only get it back up to like 325, that still will be fine. But anyway, once all my pieces were in, I let this fry for about 16 minutes before I started pulling that out in reverse order, removing the wings first. All right, there's one, and there's the other. No, that's a thigh. Here we go. Nope, that's a leg. Nope, that's the other leg. There we go. And then after the wings, we can remove the legs. And if you're careful, the tongs are fine for those smaller pieces. But for the bigger, heavier pieces, like the thighs and breasts, I like to use one of these spider web strainers. Or as we call them in the business, spiders. Since if we do grab the bigger, heavier pieces with the tongs, we can tear off that crispy coating, which in the world of fried chicken is an absolute sin. And yes, it is better to use a rack than a paper towel lined pan, since that can cause the bottoms to get soggy. And nobody, and I mean nobody, wants a soggy bottom. But anyway, let me go ahead and grab this and head over to the counter so we can get a much better look at what I think is probably the most gorgeous fried chicken ever. Oh, and if you're wondering how crispy this gets, let's take a listen, since fork don't lie. Oh yeah, that sounds about right. But anyway, after that's drained for a few minutes, we'll go ahead and transfer that onto a serving platter. And then before we start eating, we should let this cool for at least 5 or 10 minutes. Otherwise, it's just going to be too hot to enjoy. Unless, of course, you enjoy searing, burning pain in your mouth. But otherwise, let it cool down a little bit for maximum enjoyment. So that's what I did, allegedly, before I grabbed a wing and went in for a bite. And that, my friends, without a doubt, is one of the greatest fried chickens you will ever eat. Right, we're talking about a very light, but as you heard, very crispy coating, which is encasing juicy, extremely flavorful meat. And even though the ingredient list is very small, and we only use those couple spices, to me, this tastes like what fried chicken really should taste like. Okay, it's very well seasoned, but nothing is overpowering the chicken. I mean, even the pieces of cartilage in the wings were delicious, which yes, I do eat, since it's very good for your hair and nails. Or in my case, nails. And by the way, that was just a scrawny wing I was raving about. Just wait until you get into those bigger, even juicier pieces, which is what I did after plating up next to some coleslaw, plus some bread and butter pickles for a little bit of a palate cleanser. And I went ahead and grabbed that leg and went in for a big bite, which was every bit as incredible as the wing, except it had more meat. But I'm going to set that aside for now and finish it later, so I can take a knife and cut right into the center of this breast to hopefully show you exactly how juicy it is. Right, can you see that? And this really was so moist and perfectly cooked. And I was trying to find an angle with the light so you could see it glisten, which I'm not sure I did, but take my word for it, this was glistening. So I've sampled the wing, and the leg, and the breast. So let me finish up by biting into my favorite piece of fried chicken, which is the thigh. And that was not surprisingly just as amazing. Oh, and while this really is spectacular hot, for me the true test of a great fried chicken recipe is how good is it at room temperature and cold. And this definitely passes that test. In fact, just between you and me, room temperature is my favorite way to eat fried chicken. But no matter what temperature you enjoy this at, I think you're going to love this just as much as I do. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and finish these 3 pieces. And what I really hope you do is give this Dooky Chase style fried chicken a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.